He just wanted to save his daughter, but he freezes when he sees who the doctor is. Before we start, leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories are reaching. And if you're into love stories, full of emotion, twists, and resilience, subscribe to the channel. That way, you can follow everything closely and help this space grow and keep telling stories that touch the heart. The streets of Pittsburgh were grey that morning, with a damp fog that seemed to weigh on Daniel Cooper's shoulders. His old, faded blue Ford truck squeaked at every turn as he rushed toward the city's children's hospital. In the back seat, Lily, his 7-year-old daughter, moaned in pain, her skin pale and her lips bluish. Daniel drove with one hand steady on the wheel and the other stretched back, holding her tiny hand. His deep, sorrowful blue eyes were red from lack of sleep and desperation. "Stay with me, princess. Just a little longer," he murmured, his voice choking, trying to stay calm. "Daddy's here. It's going to be okay." Lily, curled up under a worn blanket with star patterns, tried to smile but coughed hard. Her fine blonde hair was stuck to her forehead from the fever. "It hurts, Daddy," she said in a weak voice. Daniel slammed his foot on the gas. Hours earlier, Lily had fainted at home. The collapse was sudden, no warning. He found her lying on the kitchen floor, clutching her chest, and ever since then, fear had consumed him. When he arrived at the hospital, he jumped out of the car without thinking. He picked Lily up in his arms, her body light as a doll's, and ran through the revolving doors. "Help! My daughter needs help!" he shouted in desperation. Nurses came quickly. In seconds, Lily was on a stretcher. Daniel tried to follow but was stopped. "Sir, we need you to wait here while we run some tests." He dropped into a plastic chair in the hallway, hands covering his face, chest heaving. A mix of panic, helplessness, and guilt ran through him. He thought of everything he'd done in the past few years to care for his daughter. Odd jobs, sleepless nights, meds paid for, with coins saved in jars. And still, it hadn't been enough. Half an hour later, a nurse approached. "Mr. Cooper, we were able to get your daughter in with the head pediatric cardiologist. Dr. Rivera will be seeing her. She's the best we've got." Daniel nodded, not really understanding. Rivera. The name sounded familiar, but he was too dazed to think. "Please, follow me to her office," the nurse said. He walked silently down a long white hallway, lit by cold fluorescent lights. With every step, he heard only the muffled thud of his own heart. When the door opened, time seemed to stop. There she was, Amelia Rivera, standing in front of an exam counter wearing a spotless white coat, reading glasses hanging from her collar, her dark brown hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her honey-colored eyes looked up slowly as she heard the door open. For a second, both froze. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice catching. He couldn't answer. His mouth went dry. His blood ran cold. This was the woman he had loved with everything he had and lost in the most cowardly way. "Amelia," was all he could say. The silence between them was heavy, almost solid. The air felt thin. She quickly composed herself and crossed her arms. "I'm the one handling your daughter's case. Let's stay focused on that." Daniel blinked, still trying to process it. The past he had fought so hard to bury was now standing in front of him, only stronger, colder, and more unreachable than ever. You're a doctor?" he said, still in shock. She nodded firmly. 10 years ago you left me with a letter and disappeared. Now you're here asking for help." He felt a lump in his throat. The memories came rushing back like a storm. The night he left, the insecurity, the fear of not being good enough, the cowardice. But there was no time for that now. "I'm not here for me," he replied, his voice trembling. "I'm here for Lily." Amelia stared at him for a long moment. Her face revealed conflicting emotions. Hurt, surprise, but also a faint trace of involuntary tenderness. "Then let's talk about Lily. she finally said, picking up the clipboard, because if it depended on what happened between us, I would have closed that door. Daniel nodded silently, but inside, a certainty pierced through him like an arrow. What he thought he had lost forever was right there, but maybe it was too late. The clipboard in Amelia's hands shook slightly, though her expression remained unreadable. Daniel watched her in silence, his chest tight. It was still hard to believe fate had crossed their paths again, but now, with his daughter's life between them. While she read Lily's test results, Daniel slowly sat in the chair across the room. His broad shoulders, marked by years of hard work and sleepless nights, slumped as if carrying the weight of the world. He took a deep breath. His mind drifted back in time, like a movie he'd never been able to erase. 7 years ago, he held a piece of paper in his hands, the pregnancy test of a woman he claimed to love. But instead of embracing her, he ran. Insecurity got the best of him. He had no money, no stability, and most of all, no courage. He wrote a letter and disappeared. What he didn't know was that life would give him another chance. But this time, there would be no running away. "Did you know?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Amelia looked up slowly but didn't answer. She simply placed the clipboard back on the desk and turned to the window, where morning light filtered through a sheer curtain. "She's a sweet girl," Amelia murmured, dodging the question, "and very strong. Her heart, it's tired, but it still has hope." Daniel bit his lower lip and nodded. There was a glimmer of restrained anguish in his eyes. "She's all I have," he said, almost in a whisper. "I made a promise. The day I held her in my arms, at the shelter. I promised I'd never let anyone take her away again. That she'd never feel alone." Amelia looked at him, surprised. "At the shelter?" He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "They said her mother died during childbirth, that the baby had been left at the hospital. I don't know why, but when I saw her, it was like the whole world stopped. I adopted Lily 2 months later. Amelia brought her hand to her chest, feeling something tear inside. A memory she had fought to bury for years began to pulse with force. "You adopted a little girl without knowing anything about her?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "She smiled at me," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "So small, so fragile. In that moment I just knew. I didn't know how to be a father, but I knew I couldn't run anymore." The silence between them was broken only by the sound of the clock on the wall. Amelia took a deep breath. Her expression shifted, from doctor to woman, from woman to memory, and from memory to something deeper, almost intuitive. She turned again, this time facing him directly. "Daniel, this surgery could save your daughter's life, but there are risks, and we'll need to move fast." He stood up immediately, his posture firmer, as if he'd just rediscovered his purpose. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll sell my truck, work day and night, start a fundraiser. You just need to tell me what to do." She hesitated, watching him. For a moment, the Daniel she'd known years ago was still there. Only now, shaped by pain, by responsibility, by the silent struggle of a father who rebuilt himself through love. "I'll do what I can," she replied, her voice softer. "For Lily, and for everything left between us." Daniel looked at her intently. The wound was still open, but for the first time there was also a possibility. That night, back in the small apartment on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Daniel sat by his daughter's bed. She was pale, but smiled when she saw him. "Did you talk to the pretty doctor?" she asked with a weak voice. He laughed. "Quietly, I did. She's going to take care of you, and Daddy's going to be right here the whole time." Lily rested her head on his chest, listening to her father's heartbeat. Strong, steady, reliable. "Promise, Daddy." Daniel held her close. He looked up at the dark ceiling and answered with a lump in his throat. "I promise. Nothing and no one is going to take you away from me. But he didn't know yet that fate was about to test him like never before. The next morning, the sky over Pittsburgh was overcast, as if it sensed what was coming. Daniel woke before sunrise, as he always did. He made the weak coffee he was used to drinking and looked at Lily still sleeping on the small couch in the living room, wrapped in her starry blanket. She was breathing with difficulty, but there was a faint smile on her lips, as if she were dreaming of something good. He knelt beside her and touched her forehead. It was far too hot, way too hot. "Lily, princess," he whispered, trying to gently wake her. She opened her eyes with effort, her eyelids heavy. "Daddy, my chest feels tight again." The panic Daniel had been trying to hold back surged through him. He jumped to his feet, grabbed the emergency bag already packed, and with trembling hands helped her into her coat. "It's going to be okay. I promise, baby. Just hang in there, okay?" They ran down the stairs. Daniel placed her in the back seat of the truck, fastened the seatbelt, and climbed into the driver's seat with his heart racing. The streets flew by like shadows in his vision. The red lights seemed to mock his urgency. He ran 2 of them. He didn't care. All he could hear was Lily's faint breathing behind him. When they got to the hospital, he ran in with her in his arms, eyes brimming with tears, his face burning with desperation. "My daughter, she's getting worse. She can't breathe." The medical team rushed in. Lily was taken immediately. Daniel was stopped from going any farther. Once again, he was left outside, helpless, watching his daughter disappear through cold, white automatic doors. Minutes later, a young doctor appeared with a clipboard in hand. There was tension in her expression, and her voice was firm but compassionate. "Mr. Cooper, your daughter is experiencing severe decompensation. Her heart is fighting beyond what it can handle. We need to operate as soon as possible." Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. "Then do it. Now." The doctor paused before continuing. "The surgery is extremely delicate. There's only one person in this hospital authorized and qualified to lead this procedure. She just took over as head of pediatric cardiology, Dr. Amelia Rivera." Daniel froze. The name hit like a blade slicing through the past. His eyes widened, his blood surged, then turned cold. He felt his body lean back as if pushed by an invisible force. "I'm sorry. Who?" he asked, his voice thick. The doctor calmly repeated the name, unaware of the impact those words had just caused. "Dr. Amelia Rivera. She's the best." He didn't answer. His heart was pounding like a muffled drum. This couldn't be happening. Amelia, the woman he loved, the woman he left behind, the woman he tried to forget every single day without success. Her name now echoed not as a memory, but as a sentence. He stepped back, brought a hand to his face, and shut his eyes tightly. The floor seemed to spin. "Mr. Cooper?" the doctor asked again. "Are you all right?" Daniel took a deep breath, swallowing the pain, the fear, the guilt. This wasn't the time to break down. Not now. "Yes, call her. If she's the one who can save my daughter, then call her." The doctor nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Alone, leaning against the cold hospital wall, Daniel looked up at the ceiling and whispered like a man pleading to the sky. Why her? Why her, of all people? In that moment, he had no idea that this surgery wouldn't just put Lily's heart at risk, but his own too. Because what Amelia carried wasn't just medical knowledge. She carried secrets, truths never spoken, and feelings that had never died. And now, there was no turning back. The elevator doors opened with a metallic hiss. Daniel stepped out onto the pediatric cardiology floor with tense shoulders and eyes fixed on the hallway. His heart was racing, but not just from fear over Lily's condition. It was because of something he couldn't control. The name echoing. In his mind, like a pulsing scar, Amelia. Every step toward the indicated room felt like crossing a minefield of memories. The years he had tried to bury, the letter he'd written with cowardly hands, the absence he had built himself. Now, it was all about to take shape behind that door. The nurse led him into a clinical meeting room where doctors explained procedures to parents. She gently announced, "Dr. Rivera will be with you shortly." Daniel took a deep breath and nodded. When the door opened, he entered slowly, as if crossing an invisible threshold between past and present. And then he saw her, Amelia. Rivera stood next to the glass table, holding a tablet with Lily's test results. The white coat gave her an almost untouchable aura, but that wasn't what froze Daniel in place. It was her face, the amber-colored eyes exactly as he remembered, the same lips that once called him my home, the same habit of touching her, left temple when nervous. Time had only made her more beautiful, with a mature, sober elegance almost unreachable. She looked up slowly. When she saw him, she paused. The impact was mutual. For a second, time stood still. There were no walls, no hospital, just two gazes meeting after years of silence, pain, and absence. "Hello, Mr. Cooper," she said in a low, restrained voice, forcing a professional posture. "I'm in charge of your daughter's case." Daniel couldn't speak for several seconds. Her name slipped from his lips before he could stop it. Amelia. "Is it really you?" She blinked slowly, swallowing hard. She closed the tablet, turned her back to him, and walked over to the window, as if she needed air. "I thought maybe you wouldn't recognize me," she said without looking at him. "How could I forget?" he said, taking a hesitant step forward. "You were the only real thing I had for a while, before I ruined everything." Amelia turned around. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her tone stayed firm. "And still you left, without looking back." Daniel lowered his gaze. That still hurt, and she knew it. But now wasn't the time to reopen old wounds. "I'm not here for me," he said, his voice thick. "I'm here for Lily, please. Tell me you can save her." The girl's name made Amelia flinch. Inside, something in her cracked, though on the outside she kept her doctor's mask. She returned to the table, opened the tablet, and projected the test results on the wall screen. "It's a delicate case," she explained, slipping back into technical language. "There's risk, but we have a chance if we act quickly. The surgery is complex, but I performed a similar one in Boston 2 years ago." Daniel listened carefully, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing in front of the woman who still lived in some hidden part of him, even after everything. "You've changed," he murmured, almost without thinking. "We all change, Daniel," she replied without emotion. "Some to survive, others to run away." He stepped a little closer, looking straight into her eyes. "I didn't run from you. I ran from myself, from the shame, from the fear of not being enough for you, for the two of us." Amelia took a deep breath. Her face was steady, but there were cracks. And in those cracks, something still shined, something she was fighting to erase. "It's too late for explanations now." "Maybe it is, but it's not too late to save our daughter." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean, our?" Daniel froze. He realized too late what he had just said, and the silence that followed between them felt like the sound of a bridge burning, or maybe being rebuilt. He still wasn't sure. She stepped forward, eyes wide, heart pounding. "What did you say?" He hesitated, but there was something in her eyes that had been waiting for the truth for a long time. And in that moment, between the cold walls of that room and the echoes of the past that never left them, Daniel understood. There was no turning back. And maybe this was the beginning of something. The weather in Pittsburgh had changed since that conversation. Outside, heavy clouds lingered over the city like a reflection of what was happening inside Daniel and Amelia. Inside the hospital, the hours dragged. On through tests, diagnoses, and a tense silence the two pretended not to notice, but that filled every inch of the space they now had to share. Lily remained hospitalized, under constant observation. Her condition was stable but delicate. The surgery was approaching, and every moment was critical. Because of that, Daniel began accompanying every test, always beside the doctor who knew him better than anyone, and who now seemed like a stranger with eyes that still knew exactly where it hurt. Their conversation started out formal. "She's been responding well to the medication. Do you think she'll handle the anesthesia?" But the answers came with subtle hesitation, long pauses, glances that drifted and then returned. Amelia kept her tone professional, but her fingers trembled when flipping through the reports. Daniel noticed. He also tried to stay focused on his daughter, but the past screamed from every corner of the room. One evening, after a last-minute test, Amelia stayed later than usual. Daniel, who was still at the hospital, offered to walk her to her car. It was raining, not a heavy rain, but light and steady, as if the sky were whispering truths no one wanted to hear. They walked side by side through the empty parking lot. Puddles reflected the streetlights, and the sound of wet footsteps echoed in the silence. She clutched her purse tightly against her body, her now loose hair beginning to stick to her face. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied, "but I want to." They reached her car, a grey SUV, modest and unassuming. She stopped but didn't unlock the doors. She turned slowly to face him, her eyes shining with something between anger and longing. "You disappeared," she said suddenly, straight to the point. "No explanation, no goodbye. You just vanished." Daniel felt like an invisible rope had tightened around his chest. Raindrops ran down his face, but not all of them came from the storm. "I was a broken kid, Amelia. I thought I had nothing to give, that you'd be better off without me around, but that doesn't make it right." She looked away, took a deep breath. Her trembling hand reached for the keys in her pocket. "You left when I needed someone the most. When my life was falling apart, It was the biggest mistake of my life," he interrupted, voice breaking. "Leaving you, staying silent, being too scared to love you the right way." She looked at him. Her honey-colored eyes were glassy, but she didn't cry. Not yet. There was something in her stronger than pride, the pain of a love that had never truly been buried. "There's no point in apologizing now," she said softly. "You have a daughter. I'm the only one who can operate on her. That's what matters." He nodded, but he couldn't bring himself to walk away. For a moment, they both stood there in the rain, as if the whole world had paused. "Do you still dream about that field outside the city?" he asked suddenly. "The White House? The swing on the porch?" She gave a sad laugh. "You remember that? I remember everything I couldn't give you." Silence settled over them again, heavy. Amelia unlocked the car and got in without another word, but before closing the door, she looked back at him over her shoulder. "Good night, Daniel." The door shut with a dry click, and he stood there, soaked, feeling that something inside him, maybe a chance, maybe regret, was still beating, still begging to be saved. He just didn't know if she would let him try. The hospital at night was quiet, broken only by the intermittent beeping of heart monitors and the soft hum of the air conditioning. The lights in the pediatric wing were dimmed, casting a warm yet tense shadow over the waiting area. Daniel sat in an armchair near the window, with Lily curled up beside him, sound asleep after another round of medication. The little girl rested, her head on his lap, her breathing fragile and her pale face glowing softly under the dim light. He gently stroked her hair, his eyes fixed on the soft movements, as if trying to memorize every detail of his daughter. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of guilt. Amelia entered quietly, holding a cup of hot tea in her hands. She wore a navy blue coat over her white coat, and her hair was down, lightly wavy from the long hours of work. When she saw Lily asleep, her expression softened. For a moment, she just watched. Then she sat down in the chair beside him. "She fell asleep?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "For the first time today, without pain." A comfortable silence settled between them, but it quickly became too heavy not to break. The sound of the soft rain against the windows helped hold up the feeling that this conversation, though unexpected, was inevitable. "Amelia, I never had the courage to write you after, or to look for you," he said, staring into the void in front of him. "It wasn't just cowardice, it was shame." She didn't respond right away. She just held the cup tighter in her hands. "I spent years trying to understand. First, I thought you left because you didn't want to be a father. Then, I started to think maybe you never really loved me." Daniel turned to her, his eyes full of tears. "I loved you more than anything, and that's exactly why I ran, because I was just a broken guy with no future, no courage to dream big. You were brilliant, beautiful, strong, and I was a blur in the world trying to look whole." Amelia took a deep breath, looking away. Then she placed the cup on the small side table and sat in silence for a few seconds. "I lost our daughter," she said finally. "At least, that's what they told me." Daniel froze. His fingers stopped moving through Lily's hair. He turned completely toward her, confused. "What?" "At the time, right after you disappeared, I went into premature labor. It was a serious complication. They told me the baby didn't survive. I was alone, too weak to question it, with no one by my side." Her voice faltered between words, but she didn't cry. She had learned to hold back tears over time. "Months later, I got an anonymous letter. It said my daughter had been registered as an orphan and put up for adoption. I tried everything. I looked for lawyers, hospitals, records, but it was like she'd been erased from the system, a clerical error or a cruelty of fate." Daniel brought his hand to his mouth. His heart pounded as if it were going to explode in his chest. You're saying that Lily?" Amelia looked at him, her eyes shining. "I have no proof, but the blood, her blood type, her medical history, her features, I feel it. I've always felt it. When I saw her for the first time, it was like looking into the eyes of something that had been torn from me." Daniel looked at Lily, sleeping so peacefully in his lap. A mix of shock, guilt, and tenderness took over his whole body. "Lily was adopted, but I never knew she was your daughter." He stood up slowly, as if the ground were no longer solid. He walked to the window, rubbing his face, trying to make sense of what was happening. Outside, the city still slept, unaware that inside, 2 lives were being shattered, and maybe mended. Amelia came closer. "Do you understand now, Daniel? Why I can't look at her without feeling like I'm looking at myself?" He nodded, swallowing back tears. "My God, and I spent all these years thinking I saved a stranger, but I saved our daughter." They looked at each other for a long moment. There were no more words, only the sound of Lily's heartbeat in the background, as if reminding them that despite everything, there was still time. From that night of confessions on, something invisible shifted between Daniel and Amelia. They didn't say anything the next day. They didn't need to. The silence that once was awkward now carried a different meaning. It was the silence of those who know, who feel, who, even wounded, still recognize each other from the inside. The days that followed were filled with constant vigilance by Lily's side. The pre-op period required strict attention, and the 2 of them took turns in the small hospital room that no longer felt so cold with the 3 of them together. Daniel slept in an old chair pushed up against the wall. Amelia, when not on duty, brought books to read quietly by her daughter's side. Even tired, Lily smiled every time she woke up and saw them there, as if she sensed, without fully understanding, that something between them was falling back into place. Sometimes they exchanged glances, other times restrained smiles, and on a few late nights all it took was a gentle touch on the shoulder during a shift change to make both their hearts tighten. On this particular night the rain was falling. Again outside, washing the rooftops of Pittsburgh with a soft melody. The warm yellow light of the lamp reflected on the polished hospital floor. Lily slept soundly, connected to monitors, her little face serene. Daniel, exhausted, had dozed, off with his head tilted back, his arms stretched across the bed, his hand holding hers as if to say, "I'm here even in sleep." Amelia walked in quietly. She paused for a few seconds to take in the scene. Daniel, in a worn grey t-shirt and jeans, had unshaven stubble and a face softened by fatigue. But what struck Amelia most was the gesture, the way he held their daughter's hand with a tenderness no one teaches, a silent, living kind of protection. She moved closer without a sound. Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them in. "You became the man I always believed was in you," she whispered, barely a breath. She stood there for a moment, as if she wanted to freeze that image in her memory forever. Suddenly, Daniel stirred, slowly opening his eyes, waking up, confused. "Amelia?" he murmured, his voice hoarse. She hesitated, then smiled. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." He sat up straight and looked at his daughter, still asleep. Then he turned to Amelia. His expression had changed, less guarded, more open, more grateful. "You've been here more than you needed to," he said. She shrugged, glancing at Lily. "I needed it too, more than I realized." A deep silence fell between them, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was like they were finally speaking the same language without words. Daniel stood up and took a step toward her. "I wish I could go back, Amelia. Do everything differently." She kept her eyes on his. "But you're here now, and she needs both of us." He nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. Lily was more than the daughter he had raised. She was the bond between two hearts that had gotten lost, and now had a chance to find each other again. And as the girl's heart monitor kept its steady rhythm, Amelia and Daniel allowed themselves to just stand there, side by side, without rushing, for the first time in years, together. But fate wasn't done with them yet. The end of the day brought a different kind of silence to the hospital. The usual hallway chatter gave way to the distant sound of rolling gurney wheels, monitors in standby mode, and a soft breeze drifting through the open windows. The Pittsburgh sky turned golden and orange, casting a melancholy hue over the building's concrete walls. Daniel walked in silence to the rooftop on the 5th floor. He had just come from another round of tests with Lily, and his body ached from exhaustion. But his soul carried the heavier weight. He knew he needed to see her, not as a father, not as a patient, but as a man, as someone who had loved and lost, and who now, without understanding how, had been placed once again in front of the same woman, with a chance to do it differently. Amelia was already there, leaning over the terrace wall, her white coat folded over her arm. The wind played with her dark brown hair, and the sun, now at the edge of the horizon, painted her skin with a soft, golden glow. She looked like she was sculpted in the light of dusk. Daniel approached slowly, respecting the moment. When she heard his footsteps, she turned around slowly. She didn't say anything. He stopped next to her, resting his hands on the ledge. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said, looking at the sky. "Not even forgiveness. I don't think I have that right. But I needed to tell you something." She waited, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Even if you never forgive me, I'm grateful I found you again, for seeing who you've become, for getting to see, even if just for a little while, who I was when I was with you. Amelia turned to him. Her eyes were misty, but there was a soft, quiet smile, like something inside her was finally finding peace. You never left me, Daniel. The words hung in the air like a confession without weight or demand, but full of everything that had gone unsaid over the years. He looked at her with tear-filled eyes. He stepped closer. His heart beat loudly as if asking for permission. "Can I?" he whispered, barely audible. She didn't answer with words. She just lifted her eyes to his, and that silent yes spoke louder than any speech. Daniel leaned in slowly. He brought his face close, afraid to break the moment. And then his lips touched hers. It was a light kiss, almost reverent, but in it was the weight of all the years passed in silence, all the nights they had dreamed of each other without admitting it, all the pain now beginning to shift into something new. Amelia closed her eyes and for a moment forgot the hospital, the walls, the fears. She only felt the warmth of his hands on her face, the soft breeze between them, the bittersweet taste of a reunion long awaited. When the kiss ended, they remained close, their foreheads touching. She chuckled softly, still with her eyes closed. "I don't know what to do with all of this." He smiled too, resting his forehead against hers. "Let's start here, no rush, just staying, just being." And they stayed there, while the sun disappeared and the city below lit up. But no light compared to what had just been reborn between them. The sky was still dark when Daniel arrived at the hospital that morning. It was surgery day. The city of Pittsburgh was slowly waking up, but his heart was already racing. The surgical wing's lobby was nearly empty, lit by cold lights that felt too quiet for what he was feeling inside. Lily had been taken to pre-op minutes before. Daniel had walked her to the door, holding her small hand until the last second. She was calm, with that sweet and tired smile, and before being taken in, she whispered in a weak voice, "Everything's going to be okay, Daddy, because now I have both of you." He wanted to respond, but no words came. He just nodded and kissed her forehead, fighting back tears. On the other side of the door, wearing blue surgical scrubs and her hair tucked into a cap, Amelia was getting ready. She washed her hands in silence, thoughts swirling. She was a doctor, trained, capable. But in that room, she wasn't only that. In that cold room, smelling of antiseptic, she was the surgeon who would operate on her daughter, and the mother terrified of losing her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second. "Please, guide me." Then she entered the operating room with steady posture, determined eyes, but inside, her heart pounded with faith and fear. Outside, Daniel paced in circles, then sat on a bench in the hallway, elbows on his knees, hands clasped in front of his face. He prayed silently. He wasn't a religious man, but in that moment, all he knew how to do was ask. "Please, save her. Save our girl." The hours felt endless. Nurses came and went. No one said anything. The clock moved, but time seemed frozen. Until nearly 4 hours later, the double doors of the OR opened. Daniel jumped to his feet. It was Amelia. She walked slowly, still in her surgical gown, cap on her head, eyes wet and a trembling smile on her lips. "She's okay." Daniel stopped breathing for a second. Amelia took another step. "She's okay. Our daughter is safe. Is safe." He ran to her and pulled her into a desperate embrace. He held her like he was holding on to life itself. Amelia cried in his arms for the first time, not from fear, but from relief. And they stayed there. No masks, no barriers, no pain between them, just two mended hearts, finally beating in sync. Daniel whispered in her ear, his voice breaking, Thank you for not giving up on her, for not giving up on us." Amelia rested her face against his neck, eyes closed. "I never could." They pulled back just enough to look each other in the eyes, and in that moment they knew what bound them was more than their daughter. It was love, the kind that survived time, fear, and silence, and now was being reborn with a strength that defied explanation. But their journey wasn't over yet. The weeks following Lily's surgery brought a light that had long seemed impossible. Recovery was slow but steady. Every pain-free day was a quiet miracle. Every step through the hospital halls was a victory. And every smile from the little girl brought breath back to Daniel and Amelia's chests. Soon she was discharged, and, for the first time in a long time, the three of them walked out of the hospital not as patient and caretakers, but as a family, still healing, still fragile, but a family. Daniel's apartment, once quiet and restrained, filled with color and presence. Amelia spent her days there, caring for their daughter and, without noticing, taking up spaces that had long been asleep. Mornings began with the smell of burnt pancakes, because Daniel insisted on trying even though he had no skill. Amelia laughed, took over the kitchen, and together, between scoops of batter and apron stumbles, they rediscovered the ease of sharing life. In the afternoons, they went to the nearby park. Lily ran with still fragile but determined steps. Her blonde hair bounced in the wind, and she always carried a little notebook where she drew hearts, trees, and often 3 stick figures holding hands. Daniel watched the two of them with eyes full of healed regret and deep admiration. Amelia, now free of the past's weight, allowed herself to laugh more, touch more, see more. At night, stories became ritual. Lily would lie on the couch between them and pick a book. They took turns reading, but always ended with a kiss on her forehead and a long, gentle cuddle, as if trying to make the moment last forever. But there was still something they hadn't done. A truth that needed to be told. On a night with a clear sky and a cool breeze, the three of them sat on the living room floor, surrounded by drawings and rag dolls. Lily was coloring a heart with 2 halves, one blue, one gold. Daniel and Amelia exchanged glances. "It was time, Princess," Daniel began, his voice calm. "There's something really important we want to tell you. Something about you, about us." Lily looked up, curious. Amelia moved closer, taking the girl's hand. "You've always been loved, from the very first day. But there's something you didn't know, and now it's time to learn." Lily furrowed her brow, but didn't let go of her mother's hand. Amelia looked at Daniel, who nodded, and then she continued, "You're not just our daughter from the heart. You're really our daughter. Biologically. I carried you, and your father. He found you when everything felt lost." The girl stayed quiet, her big eyes filled with tears, and she slowly lowered her notebook. "So, you're my 2 hearts?" The question came so pure, so sincere, it moved them both instantly. Daniel pulled her into his lap and held her tight against his chest. "Yes, my love, we always were. Even without knowing, even apart, you were always the link between us." Amelia gently ran her fingers through her daughter's hair. "And now we won't lose each other again." Lily smiled through tears and hugged them both at once, wrapping her small, determined arms around their necks. "Then I want to stay like this forever, because this is where my heart lives." And in that moment, none of them doubted it. Summer arrived slowly in Pittsburgh, bringing longer days and gentle nights, with the scent of flowers drifting through backyards and open windows. Daniel's house, once quiet and restrained, now pulsed with life, voices, laughter, and the joyful noise of Lily's bare feet running through the grass. That particular night, the backyard had been decorated with care. Small lights hung between tree branches, casting a golden glow on the freshly cut lawn. A simple wooden table had been set with family silverware, hand-folded napkins, and vases of fresh daisies. Nothing fancy, but everything done with love. Amelia stepped out of the kitchen door with a linen apron tied around her waist and a smile she couldn't hide. Her honey-colored eyes glowed with the same softness they had the first time Daniel saw her years ago. She was stronger now, more complete, but still carried the same tenderness. Lily ran up to her, holding a small blue velvet box in her hands. She wore a yellow cotton dress and a crown made of leaves and flowers from their garden. "Mommy, can I give it now?" she asked with eager eyes. Amelia frowned, slightly confused. "Give what, sweetheart?" Before Lily could answer, Daniel appeared at the back of the yard. He wore dark jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he carried a small lit candle. His steps were steady, but his eyes said everything. He walked up slowly, placed the candle on the table, and knelt in front of Amelia without saying a word. The world stood still. Lily, beaming, opened the little box and held it out to her mother. "Is it time now, Daddy?" she whispered, though everyone could hear. Daniel smiled, eyes full of tears, took one of the rings, and held Amelia's hand in his. "You've seen every part of the worst in me, and still you stayed. You fought, you loved me again. I can't promise perfection, Amelia, but I can promise that every single day I'll fight to be worthy of that love. Will you start over with me? Forever?" Amelia stood silent for a moment, her heart tight with all the memories spinning in her mind. She looked at Lily, at the glowing yard, at Daniel's hands trembling with emotion. Then she smiled tenderly, tears falling easily. "Of course I will. It's the beginning that was always meant to be ours." They embraced, and Lily jumped around them in joy, clapping, spinning with her arms raised like she was celebrating her very own heart. Later, with a few close friends gathered around the table, Amelia stood up to give a short speech. Holding her wine glass gently, she looked at Daniel and then at Lily, now curled up in her father's lap. "Sometimes true love doesn't go away," she began, her voice emotional but strong. "It just hides, it waits, it endures, and it comes back when we're ready." She paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "And sometimes the person you thought you lost forever was just waiting for the right moment to heal with you." The silence that followed was full of feeling. Some eyes filled with tears, others just smiled, with their mouths and their hearts. Lily raised her hand and whispered, "And now we're three, forever." Daniel hugged her and whispered, "Forever, my love." And that night, under the golden lights, with the soft breeze and the clear sky, there was no past between them anymore, only the future and love. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and let me know what moved you the most. If this story touched your heart in any way, don't forget to like, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've picked another emotional story that will move you even deeper. I'm sure you'll be hooked from start to finish.